Color matching is a very important and big part of your painting process. You want to be able to match the colors that you see in real life or on the photograph. And when we're color matching, we can look at three things. And the first thing is the color itself, the hue. So which main color that I know on the color wheel does it resemble most? Another thing is the tonal value. How dark or light is the color that I see? And third is how saturated is the color? Is it a very vivid color or is it muted? Is it toned down very much? Now, when I tell it this way, it looks like we have three separate things, but they're always intertwined with each other. So for instance, when you adjust the tonal value of a color on your palette, it also has consequences for the saturation of the color. Meanwhile, my printer has finished printing some color samples, so I can show you some examples of color matching. I've got a cadmium yellow light, pyrrole red, cyan, ultramarine, burnt umber and titanium white. First thing we look at, which color is this? Which color does it resemble most when we look at the color wheel? No, it's blue. That's not that difficult in this case. Then the second question is, how dark or light is the value? And you can see with the value finder, you can see from, is it a light color? No, it isn't. This blue is reasonably dark, to be honest, you see? So that's another thing we know now. And the third thing is, how saturated is the color? Is it a very vivid color or is it muted? Is it more towards gray? It's not as bright as this, not as vivid as this color, you see? But that's the case with most colors in real life. Most colors aren't that saturated as what you see here on the palette. And so these colors from the color wheel, in their most optimal form, you almost never encounter them in real life. It's always way less saturated. Okay, but how can we approach this? Is this a color, a blue color, that leans a little bit more towards green, or is it more towards purple? I think it's a reasonably neutral blue. So in this case, I take some cyan. Cyan is a neutral blue, and you can also use phthalo blue and make it a little bit lighter. Now I look at, okay, there are several things. First thing, it is too dark. I can make it lighter by adding some white, of course. So let's try. I take some titanium white and I try to adjust the tonal value. And you see that the color itself gets less vivid, less saturated right away as well. So by making it lighter, we approach the tonal value, but we also desaturate the color in this case. And that's a good thing, I think, because when you see we're getting closer with the tonal value, but I want to make this very clear, there isn't only one approach. You might as well have started by making the color less saturated first. That's also possible, so you're completely free in how you do that. Okay, now I can see we're getting close with the tonal value, but my color is way too vivid. How can I destroy the vividness of the color? I can add black. We all know that to make a color more gray we can add black, but we can also use the complementary color and to make a color duller. And the complementary color of cyan is something like red. So maybe it isn't exactly this red, but chances are that we're getting close. So I just take a little bit of red and I'm gonna try what happens. So in this small part here, and you see that the color immediately gets more gray, you see? So when I hold it close now, I can see, we're going the right way. So I'm getting more confident, so I just add a little bit to the complete mixture in this case. So that's how you can approach that. But still, my color is a little bit too dark and it's still a little bit too vivid. So I add a little bit more white to make it even more light. and compare it again. And now we're getting really close. So the tonal value is right. It still needs a little bit of red. So a little touch of red in it, like this. And compare again. We're getting close. Still not completely there. But one thing to keep in mind, if I add this red, I also make the color darker. You see? Because this tonal value is darker than the tonal value of the blue. So sometimes you see people adjust the tonal value of the color they want to add before they add. So now the tonal value is more like this, and then when I add it, it doesn't change the tonal value of this color that much. So now we're getting really close, you see? So we can check by putting it over there. Let's clean the palette again. Cleaning the palette, la 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 la. This color is interesting. What kind of color is that? Is it blue? No, it isn't. Is it green? Might be. Is it more towards orange? I don't know. It's not red, it's not purple. It's more in this zone of the color wheel. I can always approach it like this. What color definitely goes in it? Now, I can see clearly that it contains yellow, so that's one thing. I put some yellow on my palette here. You see? But that's way too yellow. Now I can see what color is missing in my mixture. And now I think it lacks a little bit of blue. So, but I'm not that sure, so I just add a tiny amount. And now I see, oh, it's getting green. And I didn't want that. So, what's happening now? Now it's way too green. What is my color lacking now? Now I can see, it needed a little bit more of red maybe. So let's try and add some red. And just look what happens. And then we see, hey, this is getting more of that strange color that we see over there. So, you see, I'm getting in the right direction. So the funny thing is, most colors that we see contain three primary colors. So this is a good example of that. It contains yellow, cyan and red in this case. But you see, my color is now still a little bit green. So I think I add another touch of red. Make it slightly lean towards red a little bit more. The tonal value of my color is a little bit too dark. And that's nice because I think that now at this stage my color needs to be lightened up with white. And maybe we're getting really close then as well with the color, but also this, with the tonal value. So if I add a little bit of white, that tones down the color as well, and it makes the color lighter. So you see, it's two steps in one. Two steps at the same time. You see, it's getting close, but it's a little bit too yellow. I just add a little bit more of blue and a little bit more of red. So, but that way the color, the tonal value will get darker again. So then I'll add some white again. See? And then I think we are getting fairly close. Yep, there we are, you see. That color is good enough. So you see, that's the thing with color matching. You constantly try and you compare with the color that you see and you check what does my mixture lack. What is missing in my mixture when I compare it to the source color. I think you can already tell that a color like this in this photograph is very close to this color, you see? So it might need a little bit more white and might need a little bit more of red, for instance. We can try. It's just for an instance, you see. So now in this case, I think I want to adjust the tonal value first so that I'm a little bit close. I can see clearly now that my color lacks a little bit of red. So I add a very slight amount of red. Be very careful, especially when you're mixing small amounts of paint. You see, now I'm getting very close to this color. And of course, acrylics dry darker, so they have a color shift. So when this dries, my color will be slightly darker than what we see there. You already can see it here, and it will happen here as well. Let's try this color. What kind of color does it resemble most when I look at the color wheel? Really, I think you will agree it looks like a little bit orange, red-orange. So in this zone of the color wheel. So how do I make orange? I take some red and some yellow. So here I have pyrrole red. Let's take some, oh, here I still have some, I'm not sure. So I'll take some yellow from here. Yeah, like this. Now I get to an orange color. But as you can see already, of the three things, we have color. Now the color maybe is right, but the tonal value is too dark and the saturation is way too high. It's way too saturated if you compare it with this color. So now I'm guessing, what should I do? I can adjust the tonal value, and I can do that with white in this case, because some colors you can also make lighter with yellow, for instance. So if I because yellow is a light color, but if I'll add yellow, my orange will get more yellow-orange. Might be good, I don't know, but I think in this case it's better to lighten the color with white, because with white I don't make it more yellow, but I desaturate the color as well. So take a look. Here you see that if I add white, the color gets lighter, of course, and it also gets less saturated. So, and if I compare it now, I can see, we're going in the right direction. So I get more confident. I add it to the rest of the mixture. But as we can see, one thing is a little bit missing at this moment. It's still a bit too vivid, and it lacks a little touch of yellow, if I see it correctly. So I add a little touch of yellow, like this. But the color gets more vivid with that as well. So you see, because that yellow, we add more color, we add more color, so it gets more vivid again, like this. So now, what I want to try to make it less vivid is add a little bit of cyan, a very little touch, to dull it down, because cyan it's a little bit at the other side of the color wheel. It's not exactly the right complementary color, but that doesn't even matter that much, because it's good enough to dull it down. So now I have a color that's very close. It lacks a little touch of white, I think. So like this. So you see, I hope that you can see clearly. Oh, it's still a little bit too vivid. Add a little bit more of cyan and a little touch of white, because when I add cyan, I also adjust the tonal value. It becomes darker again. So it's more like this, I think. So again, yeah, that's right. You see, and see how nice, what a nice colors you get when you carefully mix colors from nature. It's beautiful. These are such nice, mysterious colors. These colors are great colors as well, but they are so very vivid, and these have have a little bit more of a mysterious nature, more depth in it. So let's clean the palette again. That's my life, cleaning palettes. As a last example, I will take a green color. Which one do you like? Nobody replies, so I'll choose myself. Let's take this one. It's a desaturated green, as you can see. It's not very vivid if you compare it with this. So in this case, I choose to make a green from ultramarine blue and the cat yellow light, because when I mix these two, I automatically get a less saturated color. You see, this is not a very bright green. This is a shortcut. And I've told about this in the videos about color mixing before, about complementary colors and also about color bias. But this is a blue, the ultramarine blue is a blue that consists theoretically of two primary colors, because it contains cyan. Cyan is a neutral color, and it also contains a little bit of magenta, because it is a blue that leans a little bit towards purple. So what I'm doing here now is I'm mixing three primaries, because I have mixed ultramarine with cat yellow, and cat yellow is a primary. But this blue also consists already of two primaries, so three primaries mixed together always gets a dull result, a duller result. Very quickly, if I mix cyan and yellow, cat yellow light, I get a vivid green, because now I'm mixing only two primaries, because this cyan is a primary color and yellow is a primary color. So you see, and if I add a little bit of red in this mixture, then I also get a duller green here. So that's more work to do than when I just mix ultramarine and cat yellow. So that's a shortcut, and that's why I also told in the video about which colors are useful to start with painting. It is handy to have two versions of blue and two versions of red. I forgot to put it on my palette, but I have magenta as well. Most of the times, but that's the story. But let's go on. You see, let's compare this color with the color that I have here. I made a little bit more of the same mixture, otherwise I can't show it clearly. So this is a muted color, you see, so I compare it here. What is it lacking? Well, it's too dark. That's a thing that's obvious. And in this case, I'm not quite sure what it is lacking. I think it lacks a little bit of yellow, but it might as well be that it lacks a little bit of red, because maybe this color is way too vivid still. Shall I try? Let's try it. I'll add a little bit of red. So that's a color that's far away on the color wheel from green. And when I add that, the color will get even less vivid. You see, and here it's happening already. I can tell that this is gonna go in the right direction. You see, this is getting closer to that feel of that color. But if you aren't sure, there are several ways you can get the same result. You can as well try to first adjust the tonal value of the color. Oh, now I added way too much white, so you see this is way too light if you compare it with that. So I have to sort of start over again. I just add a little bit more of ultramarine again, so it gets darker. You see, it gets darker right away. And now I'm gonna compare. It lacks a little bit of yellow to start with. Maybe just a little bit more. So, but you see that white, to make it lighter, also toned the color down. But now you see I'm getting close, but my color is still a little bit saturated, so I add another touch of red. Very small amount, because you also want to check if you're going the right way. So I add it to a small pile here. Maybe a little bit more, if I see it like this. You see what it does? It shifts the color in another direction again. Now we're getting very close. So this was the right decision, the right way to go. So I added a little bit more to my mixture, like here. And I compare again. We're getting very close. Can't tell it that good. I think this is good enough. Maybe it's a little bit too dark. And maybe it lacks a little bit of red still. So let's mix those two in it and let's have a look. I'll put it over here. Yeah, that's better. You see? So now we're close enough for that color. I will do a brown color to finish it off because we haven't gotten to the brown colors yet. And brown colors are colors on this side of the color wheel mostly. So darker versions of orange yellow, orange red, a little bit towards purple. If you have the darker versions of those colors, when I look at this color, and I have burnt umber, my first option would be, my first choice would be to take burnt umber and then look and, oh, it's way too dark, okay, I'll adjust it with a little bit of white. So that's my first option, but I'll show another option. When you don't have burnt umber, you can get there in another way. So this is getting close, but now it seems that it lacks a little bit of red, so I add a little bit of red. So like this, and maybe I add a little touch of yellow now. So always be careful. Yep, there we are. So that's the color for here. Another option is when you mix 3 primaries, you can also get good browns. So if I mix red, and mainly with red and yellow in it. So for instance, I make an orange color, you see here, and I add a little bit of, well, I can add cyan in this case, I want to. You see, I get a sort of a brown color here. Well, if I add more yellow, just for an example, you see, you get more brown color like this, and of course I can shift when I add a little bit more orange to it. You get all variations of brown. That's another way to go about it. You can make brown colors with reds and oranges and a little bit of blue in it. Well, let's try and match another color then. Let's try to match this one, for instance. So I'm not going to use burnt umber. I pretend that I don't have that color. I'll take some red. So first I think, okay, it's brown, so I need to make a brown. Well, maybe a little bit of yellow, and maybe, well, let's try a little bit of ultramarine. We can use that as well. And you see, I get a red-brown color here. So if I compare, it's too dark to start with, so I'm not sure what my color is lacking, so I add a little bit of white to go to the right tonal value as fast as I can. But now I see, okay, I have a color that is way too red if I compare it. That's one thing, so I'll add a little bit of yellow to start with because it lacks a little bit of yellow. That's getting closer. I can already tell if I see it like this, but then it is way too vivid, I think, so maybe it lacks a little bit of blue again, little bit of ultramarine. So it's always a fine balance when you're trying to find the right colors. Well, we're getting very close. A little touch of cyan again. But this is also why I prefer to pre-mix the most important colors on my palette before I start painting. Because mixing colors, if you want to do it right, it takes a lot of your concentration, and it takes a lot of time. And it's easier when you have prepared the most important colors on your palette, because then you can, when you go painting, you just start painting, putting the colors at the right spots, and you make some in-between colors, so to speak. That's why I like that. And now that I'm doing this, of course, when you have mixtures available and you think, oh, I want to make that color, for instance, well, you can take a little bit of your mixture as a starting point and try to make it a little bit lighter, for instance, and see what you have then. And you see, oh, okay, now I have this color. It's too light and it lacks, it's too dark. It also lacks a little bit of yellow, and yellow is a color that also makes it a little bit lighter as well. So you see, when you've started with some colors, you can very easily mix other colors, because, of course, in a photograph there is always sort of color harmony of most of the time. So here is a portrait, and you will see that these colors are all sort of variations on the same theme. So here I'm very close. It lacks a little bit of yellow still, but I'm very close already to this color. And so that way you can adjust your mixtures very easily to make it slightly different. Now, I hope that was helpful. See you next time.